I'm Gina Connell, Chief Marketing Officer at BP Collins, and I'm here today having a chat with Steve Perry, our Business Development Manager, and Claire Filer, a family partner in one of our legal teams. So, Claire, if we can kick off with you, from a family lawyer's perspective, what challenges does this lockdown present for people?
So many people across the country, whatever they do, are obviously going to be finding the current situation quite difficult. I know I'm struggling to manage my responsibilities at home with working, and the juggling that I normally do is becoming even more difficult in the current circumstances. So as a family lawyer, I obviously think about my clients and those that are experiencing difficulties in their family situation. I think the lockdown is going to be particularly hard for those people who might be unhappy in their relationship and want to separate. This is more challenging in the current environment. There's obviously people that are separated and have children together that are finding their child contact arrangements more challenging. And I think it's going to be particularly difficult for those who are suffering domestic abuse in their household. And obviously the options for them are perhaps more difficult in the current climate.
Claire, just focusing in on separated parents, what guidance is out there and what should they be thinking about?
So CAFCAS, which is the organisation that promotes the welfare of children and sometimes represents them in family proceedings, have produced some really helpful guidance, which is on their website, which I really would encourage people to read. That guidance talks about what the government have said. It makes it clear that children can travel between the households of their parents where their parents are separated. But it also gives some tips for people, things that they should be thinking about in the current situation, such as whether alternative contact arrangements can be put in place if physical contact is impossible, which it might be in limited situations.
Claire, does it make a difference if you already have a child arrangements order in place?
So people that have got child arrangements orders should still have a look at the CAFCAS guidance. However, there has been additional guidance that has been given by Andrew McFarlane, who's the president of the family division. And he's given specific guidance about how COVID-19 will apply to existing child arrangements orders. Essentially what that guidance says is that parents should strive to stick to the spirit of child arrangements orders, even where in certain, although hoped limited situations, those orders can't be complied with exactly to the letter. It also talks about parents trying to agree if orders need to be varied in any way. And the onus appears to be on trying to agree those arrangements and not make applications to court unless those applications are necessary.
You talked about family courts. How are they responding to the challenges?
So the family court are responding quite quickly to the challenges that are faced. They've issued a lot of guidance over the course of the last week, and it's anticipated that that guidance is going to develop as the days and weeks pass. What's clear is that remote hearings will be the default option, and when I say remote hearings, I mean hearings that will happen over the telephone or by various video conferencing facilities rather than happening in person as they normally would. The courts put out protocols for how those sorts of hearings should be dealt with, how they should be arranged. Various local courts are putting out their own guidance. Unfortunately, some local courts are having to close, and we can obviously provide information to people about how those court closures might impact their case. Hearings that have already been listed are sometimes being vacated, or remote hearings being put in place quickly to decide how the hearing should be dealt with. All I would say is that anyone that does have a hearing coming up should seek advice as soon as possible about how that hearing should be dealt with.
Claire, we've seen a bit in the news about stresses on families. For in unhappy relationships who are, confined in the same space together, what could and should they be doing if they're in an unhappy relationship in this situation?
It's really difficult, obviously, for people in that situation, and it's difficult to give advice that applies to everyone. But in terms of general tips, what I would say is that for people that aren't at risk in their home, it's perhaps more sensible than it ever has been to think about being a bit more tolerant, a bit more patient, and trying to struggle through and work together to deal with what is a difficult situation for many people. Obviously, family lawyers like me and the other lawyers in our team are still available to give advice. We can give advice over the telephone or over video conferencing. And if people do find time to have a private conversation, then that can be arranged. In terms of next steps, obviously this lockdown is not going to last forever. And so I would encourage people to think about focusing on where their lives might be after the lockdown, perhaps thinking about a project they can focus on, or focusing on their children.
And what about the most vulnerable? So obviously in particular those of the victims of domestic abuse?
People in that situation are obviously very, very vulnerable if they're trapped in a lockdown with their abuser. I would recommend that those people seek advice from the National Domestic Violence Helpline or from another charity that offers that advice. If you're in a situation where you need emergency assistance, then you should dial 999. It's also important to remember that although the family courts are operating in a slightly different way, they are still open for business. Urgent applications can be made. So people in that situation would have the option of applying for a non-molestation order, which is an order that regulates the behaviour of a perpetrator of domestic abuse. And a breach of a non-molestation order is a criminal offence. Alternatively, someone could apply for an occupation order or at the same time as a non-molestation order. That kind of order regulates the occupation of a family home or excludes someone from it.
Claire, thanks for giving us some, I think, much needed advice for people today. Hopefully many of our viewers found that helpful. If anyone wants to talk to Claire or would like more information, you can find us at bpcollins.co.uk. Thanks for checking in with us.